What if a woman's presence in a man's life isn't just romantic, but spiritual? What if love wasn't just comfort, but confrontation? Fyodor Dostoevsky did not write women as decoration. He did not reduce them to love interests, symbols of innocence, or objects of desire. He wrote them as fire, as mystery, as salvation, and as judgment. In his world, women are never background. They are the turning point. To Dostoevsky, a woman was not merely someone to be loved. She was someone who revealed. She could reveal a man's weakness, his shame, his madness, or she could awaken in him something higher, something sacred. He believed that the presence of a woman could either drag a man into darkness or pull him toward the light, but never leave him unchanged. And that's what makes his vision so dangerous, because it asks more of love than we're used to. It demands that love not flatter, but purify. That it doesn't just feel good, but makes us face who we really are. Dostoevsky's women suffer. They forgive. They endure. But they also confront, destroy illusions, and expose hypocrisy. They are both wound and healing. And through them, he asked a deeper question. What if redemption comes not from power, but from surrender? In this video, we'll explore how Dostoevsky used female characters not just to reflect life, but to challenge it. How he saw love not as escape, but as trial. And how women, in his world, are never just characters. They are mirrors, and sometimes they show us what we'd rather not see. Let's begin. Dostoevsky never painted women in one color. He painted them in opposites, blinding light and dangerous shadow. To him, woman was both sanctuary and trial. She could lift a soul toward grace or pull it into ruin. Not because she changed, but because of what she awakened in the man who stood before her. His female characters are often torn between two poles, the saint and the seductress. But Dostoevsky's genius was that he never reduced them to either. He showed that the same woman could be both, depending not on her, but on the eyes that beheld her. A man who sees only his own desires finds temptation. A man who sees beyond himself glimpses the divine. This duality runs through all his work. In The Idiot, Nastasia Philippovna is radiant and destructive. She is adored, desired, shamed, and feared because no one can fully possess her. She doesn't offer comfort. She offers a mirror, and it shatters every man who looks too closely. In The Brothers Karamazov, Grushenka is a figure of lust and chaos. But as the story unfolds, what seemed like seduction begins to reveal something more fragile. Wounds, abandonment, a hunger for love deeper than any physical need. To Dostoevsky, woman is not the enemy of man. She is the test of man, not a test to pass, but a test to face. She reveals his limits, exposes his illusions, and brings him to a crossroads, descend into possessiveness, or ascend into reverence. The feminine, for Dostoevsky, is never simple. It is sacred because it is dangerous. And it is dangerous because it cannot be controlled. Not by reason, not by force, only by truth. In Dostoevsky's world, redemption rarely arrives through doctrine. It doesn't come from argument or ritual. It comes from love, raw, undeserved, and often feminine. When his male characters fall, they fall hard, into guilt, into isolation, into madness. But it is not reason that saves them. It is not philosophy. It is the quiet presence of a woman who does not condemn them, who sees their shame and does not look away. A love that does not need to fix, but simply remains. This is the power of Sonia in Crime and Punishment. She does not lecture Raskolnikov. She does not moralize. She simply walks with him, step by step, into the darkest corners of his soul. And she does it without fear. Not because she is naive, but because she knows what it means to be broken. Her purity is not untouched. It is forged in suffering, and that is why it heals. Love, for Dostoevsky, is not romantic in the shallow sense. It is redemptive. It is spiritual warfare, the kind of love that reaches down into hell and refuses to let go. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands honesty, and in that demand, it transforms. He believed that only through this kind of love can a man truly rise, not by earning it, but by surrendering to it, letting it see him, not as he pretends to be, but as he is, in his filth, in his fear, in his failure. And when that love remains, even then, something begins to shift. Not instantly, not loudly, but deeply. Because Dostoevsky knew, grace doesn't come when we deserve it. It comes when we finally stop pretending we ever could. Dostoevsky never trusted passion. He saw in it a kind of madness, beautiful, intoxicating, but ultimately corrosive. Desire, in his world, is not love. It is hunger. It consumes rather than connects. And when left unchecked, it becomes a kind of violence, first toward the other, then toward the self. His male characters often confuse love with possession. They don't want to know a woman. They want to own her, to conquer her, to reduce her mystery into something manageable, controllable. But the feminine in Dostoevsky refuses to be held in a cage. The moment desire turns to domination, she begins to vanish, or worse, destroy. This is the tragedy of Dmitry Karamazov. His obsession with Grushenka is not love, it's a battle. Between pride and humiliation, longing and rage. He doesn't just want her, he wants to be consumed by her, and he hates her for it. This paradox of wanting and resenting the very same person is what Dostoevsky understood so well. Passion that burns too hot doesn't bring unity, it brings ruin. Even Prince Mishkin, the purest of Dostoevsky's men, is not spared. His gentle fascination with Nastasia becomes a quiet tragedy. He wants to save her, but part of him is drawn to the very fire that destroys her. He cannot resist the pull of her suffering, and it breaks him. Desire, in Dostoevsky's world, is dangerous because it blinds. It makes gods out of people and monsters out of moments. It pretends to offer transcendence, but leads only to collapse. He didn't condemn passion outright, but he warned that without love rooted in humility, desire will not raise you higher. It will pull you under, and it will ask you to thank it as you drown. In Dostoevsky's world, suffering is everywhere, but not all suffering is the same. His male characters often fight it, curse it, or collapse beneath its weight. But his women? They carry it differently. Not with bitterness, but with quiet acceptance. Not with pride, but with depth. Their suffering doesn't shrink them. It sanctifies them. To Dostoevsky, this wasn't weakness. It was power, just not the kind the world understands. Because the world measures strength in resistance, in defiance. But he saw another kind of strength, the strength to endure without spectacle, to bleed in silence, to remain soft in a life that tries to harden you. Alyosha's mother, despite being broken by illness, radiates something otherworldly. Sonia, forced into degradation, still walks with grace. Even Lizaveta, the mute woman in the brothers Karamazov, says nothing. Yet her suffering echoes through generations. These women are not loud. They do not command the room, but they change the men who enter it. There's a sacredness in this kind of pain, not because it's noble to suffer, but because Dostoevsky saw suffering as the forge of the soul. And in women, he found an ability to suffer with dignity, not to escape pain, but to transform it into something purer, something spiritual. This doesn't mean his women are passive. It means they move in ways that transcend violence. They don't fight suffering with fists. They absorb it. They outlast it. And in doing so, they reveal a truth Dostoevsky believed most men were too proud to see. That salvation does not always come through power. Sometimes it comes through patience. Sometimes it looks like surrender. And sometimes it wears the face of a woman who suffers without losing her light. Dostoevsky was never interested in saints who had never sinned. He was drawn to those who had fallen, deeply, visibly, and without excuse, and yet still carried within them a kind of quiet holiness. Nowhere is this clearer than in his portrayals of women who are judged, discarded, and shamed by society, the so-called fallen. But Dostoevsky doesn't write them to be pitied. He writes them to be revered. Sonia Marmeladova sells her body to feed her family. Society calls her unclean. Religion would call her a sinner. But Dostoevsky calls her a saint, not because she is pure, but because she is merciful. Not because she avoids sin, but because she walks straight through it, carrying others with her. She reads scripture not with piety, but with love. She doesn't preach. She forgives. The same complexity surrounds Nastasia Filipovna. Beautiful, defiant, and destroyed by the gaze of others, she is seen as corrupt. And yet, beneath the surface, she is consumed not by pride, but by shame. Her madness is not arrogance, it's grief. And Dostoevsky does not turn away from it. He shows it in full, and still asks us to look at her not with judgment, but with trembling respect. For him, the fallen woman is not an object lesson in morality. She is a challenge to the reader, a mirror to hypocrisy. She is proof that purity is not about appearances, that worth is not erased by sin, that sometimes those who suffer most deeply love the most completely. Dostoevsky believed that if God exists, he walks beside the outcast, not above her. And the moment we learn to see her not as ruined, but as radiant, that's the moment we begin to understand what compassion truly means. Dostoevsky rarely spoke of motherhood in grand declarations. He did not glorify it with sentiment or place it on a pedestal for the sake of convention. Instead, he revealed it quietly, like something ancient, hidden beneath the surface of his stories. A force that doesn't announce itself, yet shapes everything around it. To him, the mother was not just a figure. She was a presence, a quiet architect of fate. In the background of his most tormented men, there is often a mother, loving, broken, or absent, and her influence is never simple. It is primal. It is foundational. It lingers. In the brothers Karamazov, Alyosha's mother dies young, but her memory marks him. Her gentleness, her mysticism, her suffering, they shape the man he becomes, long after she is gone. Her love doesn't speak. It imprints. Dostoevsky understood that the maternal was not just biological, it was spiritual. It was the power to create to sustain, to endure without needing recognition. While fathers in his novels often shout, disappear, or destroy, the mothers remain, tethered to life, holding space for what others abandon. And in that quiet strength, Dostoevsky saw a kind of mystery, not the mystery of the unknown, but of the unspoken. The maternal force does not explain itself. It gives, it shelters, it survives. It is felt long after it is forgotten. He didn't worship motherhood as an idea. He honored it as a reality, one that lives not in ideals, but in gestures, in sacrifices that go unnoticed, in patience that is never named. Because in Dostoevsky's world, the most powerful forces are not the loudest. They are the ones that create life, shape souls, and vanish without ever needing to be seen. To Dostoevsky, woman was never just a character. She was a reflection, not of herself, but of the men around her. Not because she lacked depth, but because she had the power to reveal it in others. In his universe, men do not simply fall in love with women, they are exposed by them. His female characters rarely change. They remain consistent in their wounds, their compassion, their complexity. But the men who encounter them, they unravel, they confess, they collapse. They are forced to confront the parts of themselves they would rather keep buried. Raskolnikov, in the presence of Sonia, sees the full weight of his crime, not because she accuses him, but because her purity leaves no room for his excuses. Mishkin, when faced with Nastasia, cannot maintain his innocence. Her suffering strips him of illusion. Even Dmitry Karamazov, driven by lust and shame, finds in Grushenka not just temptation, but the reflection of his own broken desire to be forgiven. Dostoevsky understood that love is not always comfort. Sometimes it is revelation. Sometimes it is a mirror held up to a soul that does not want to be seen. And it is often the woman who holds that mirror, not to punish, but to awaken. In a world of masks, she becomes the test, not of her beauty or obedience, but of a man's ability to face himself. Dostoevsky didn't offer answers. He offered encounters. And through each woman, he left us with a question. What would she reveal in you? Not who you pretend to be, not who you want to be, but who you are when nothing is left to hide.